All right. Welcome, everyone, to week 13 of Navigating Deconstruction here on Monday night. And so we are ready to go ahead and start. I'm going to let Ryan take us through a time of prayer first, and then I will go from there. So, Ryan, I'll hand it off to you.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Let me just open us with prayer, like Dad said. We can all just close your eyes or whatever's most helpful for you, and then just take some deep breaths and relax there. Somebody's audio. Oh, that's yours, Dad.
Yeah, let me.
Yeah. Father, we're grateful for this evening, and we're grateful to get to be together in this way and get to commune in this way, both with you and with each other. And we're grateful for the way in which we've been able to hear from one another and learn from one another over these past 11, 12 weeks. And we ask for an opening of our hearts and minds once again this evening, and allowing us to be able to receive whatever you have for us to receive through the content this evening. And we ask for the Spirit to work in our heart and mind, as always, to be able to help us to see areas where we can grow, and also to encourage us where we need encouragement. And we trust you that you have already done all these things and will continue to do that. And pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you there, son. So gave you the handout, and this one on Susan's computer is going to be just a little different on the desktop here than mine. But so in this week, which we'll go ahead and give you a heads up right now, Ryan and I talking today, thinking this may be our last class, barring just extraordinary, exuberant conversation at the end with a lot of dialogue or something that where we feel like we need to carry on next week. But otherwise, we trying to allow time for some of that dialogue tonight. Just want to go through a few of these quotes, reflections from others on the subject of integration and spiritual bypassing. And in short, we could say, spiritual bypassing may be a new term, and Ryan will talk about that a little bit. But in short, it's talking about the interior work that we need to do, how easy it is for us whenever we encounter something new. And we all, I think it's okay. We can be kind of wired this way to think, okay, how do I verbalize this? And we all need to grapple with that. But this is going to be first encouraging us to do some of the harder interior work, which will facilitate the sharing of it later. So even some of these, just one of the students saying they're having trouble connecting, but I don't think that's any issue here on our end. So Susan and I listening through a book the other day, and just mentioned this first one, wisdom comes when we acknowledge what we can never know. We stated that back in some form whenever we were talking about some of our intense focus on certainty, but that we all need to be able to back up. It doesn't mean we don't do our work, we don't check our brains at the door, but we acknowledge, and as we grow and mature, and it's not a given, that we all grow and mature, old age can arrive all by itself sometimes without the wisdom. But if we do keep maturing in Christ, we will all acknowledge there are some things there. we get comfortable with ambiguity and with mystery. Um, Rohr stating mostly, we must remember that Christianity in its maturity is supremely love-centered, not information or knowledge-centered. Doesn't mean that knowledge has no place, but Paul acknowledges, 1 Corinthians 13, I can have it all in terms of knowledge, and without love, it's worthless. But we do want to grow. Knowledge should not be all just for intellect's sake, but it should always move us towards love. It is love-centered. Derek Flood, scripture, when read right, must lead to love. True. I mean, and we read it well, we read it as Jesus intended. It will move us to being more loving. And if we see that love absent in people's lives, then we inherently acknowledge something's amiss here, something's off. The first fruit of the Spirit, of course, being love. Soren Kierkegaard, Ryan and I talked about another quote of his, but this one can be helpful in that it focuses on the interior work. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. And so there again is that interior work. Rohr saying it in a different place, like prayer should always help us to look within ourselves to see more of the love of God, the peace of God within us, because the more we cultivate that in our lives, the more that we will reflect that to those around us. I added this one later. Sorry, it's a new computer, so weird things may crop up here. Eugene Peterson, I've appreciated this from years back. So what I want to say is patience is prerequisite, indispensable. Formation of spirit, cultivation of soul, realizing a lived congruence between the way and the truth. All this slow work, all of this is slow work requiring endless patience. And I think we can all recognize truth in that. It probably, reverberates with us in some way, that as much in our, especially in our instant gratification society, we would love for the fruit to pop out on the tree overnight. The fruit of the Spirit just does not appear that way. Endless patience on our part, and to love ourselves, because we can be our worst critic, right? We can be hardest on ourselves. And Wesley Hill, in his book, Washed in Waiting, is quoting someone that may have mentioned it before in this class, but just such a good thought that helped me from 5 years or so ago when I read it more, I think 7 or 8. Be patient with all that is unfinished within yourself. We could think of being patient with other people, not easy sometimes, but be patient with what's unfinished within you. And so we can look at ourselves, maybe be frustrated at times with our fill in the blank, judging other people, judging them by outward appearances, not being where we would like to be in prayer, in our walk, but be patient with yourself. And that's been so helpful to me, because if we're not kind to ourselves, it almost carries over that it makes it harder to be kind, truly kind to others. And Jesus touches on that, right? In Matthew 22, 35 to 37, what's the greatest command? Love the Lord your God, the Shema, kind of Deuteronomy 6, for love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He doesn't leave out loving yourself. And self-hatred practiced in any form, of course, extreme form, cutting or, something detrimental to our bodies. But there's other lesser forms of self-hatred that will surface in our lives, be seen, be visible to other people if we don't know how to love ourselves. So all of that really does feed into what Ryan will go ahead and start taking us through as we talk about this interior work of not bypassing the spiritual work that we need to do within. But I'll just pause there. Any thoughts, reflections, responses from anyone to this point? Ryan, I would say go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks for all that introduction there. Okay, I didn't know if somebody was saying something there. Well, as you can see on the notes, we'll get down to the section on spiritual bypassing in a moment, but wanted to start with just some general thoughts, I think from both Dad and I, as it relates to learning new things, gaining a new perspective on something, or I should say just a new perspective for you, not that it's new per se, or having a fresh understanding of something, generally raises within us this feeling of wanting to go and tell other people about it, especially those who for sure need to hear it, right? And so thought it would be helpful. This is just some general thoughts that I think probably we all already know / are aware of. So not that there's anything new here per se, but just wanted to go through just kind of some thoughts as to some experiences as to how we can think about some important things when learning new things. And if you're like myself, pretty eager and keen to learn, to read and learn as often as possible, I've had some good experience in what not to do. And that's helped me to kind of know in some ways what may be a more helpful and healthy kind of way of going about it. So number one, I think it's generally fair to say, first take time to look at how that new perspective or idea affects the web of beliefs that you currently hold. Does it require you to shift how you think about this and also about that, et cetera? Which is to say, pay attention. Sometimes when we learn something new in one area, we don't take the time to really think through the depth of that idea or new perspective and the ways in which it actually affects some of the other beliefs that we think we hold. And that's important for many reasons, but I mean, we'll get to those and some of those in a second. Immediately telling someone else about a new idea is usually not helpful, as these are just some thoughts. It comes across as not well thought out. I've experienced that, and I've made the mistake of doing that a number of times. You get a new idea that you feel is super helpful or exciting or whatever, and you start to tell somebody about it only to realize that you haven't really thought through the implications of it. You haven't really thought through all the directions in which it affects things that you believe, things that maybe they believe, et cetera, et cetera. So just generally, this is needless to say, taking a slower and more patient and more, for lack of better words, mature approach to not do this. B, upon further questioning, usually in conversation with people, upon further questioning, it can reveal that you haven't thought through its ramifications or don't know how it all works. So just like I said, but mainly as it relates to that person perceiving that there's actually holes in what you're saying. And needless to say, that's never helpful if you're wanting to explain something to someone, or even, God forbid, convince someone of something. For them to see some holes in it the very first time you start talking about it, that's usually not that helpful, right? C, if that person cannot see how you have been living differently, how you have changed in your thoughts and actions because of your new perspective, they will of course be less likely to receive the idea. And we'll get down to that again in a second. But this is just the general idea of, usually it turns out it's more helpful to actually live and experience how that perspective or idea shifts the way that you live, if indeed it does actually shift the way you live at all. And then to be able to talk with people from that perspective. So number two, then, you can ask yourself, when I didn't think this way, like before I understood things in the way that I'm currently feeling like I'm understanding them, what resistance did I have to this idea? I found that to be a useful question for myself. And then the subsequent question, which is, what reasons would I have given to argue against this point of view? And orient yourself with the ways in which people could have resistance to this idea. Does it affect someone's cherished beliefs about blank, whatever it is? Try and put yourself in your own shoes previous to knowing this idea or this perspective, and or put yourself in the shoes of those who have never had, if you want to say, the good fortune of learning what you have just learned, in whatever area capacity that is. Then trying to see it from that perspective, I think, helps to give a bit more understanding as to some of the questions and thoughts and or concerns that people would have when listening to it. Yeah, and then I just say, most of the time it is worth looking at how you arrived at the new perspective in order to understand what shifted in your mind to help you get there. That's a really wonderful and fun exercise. If any of you have ever done that or have the time to do that, is to actually look at, if your mind has shifted in some significant way at any time, try to go back and look at what were some of the things that happened that either abruptly or slowly shifted your perspective. It's always illuminating, and it always helps to kind of think through what might be helpful for someone else. Not that those exact same steps are what somebody else would go through, but at least it helps you to kind of see, okay, I didn't change my mind just like that. There was quite a number of different shifts that took place. And that's always really helpful for empathic appreciation or understanding of where somebody is in their thoughts and thinking. Let me just get 3 and 4, and then I'll pause. And if you have thoughts on any of those, you can speak up. So 3, how does this new perspective or belief affect the way that I live? So just articulating this more clearly here, articulate the areas of your life that would need to shift to be in alignment with the idea or the new perspective. And begin, even with small steps, putting into practice living in ways consistent with that perspective or idea. This goes with 4. So let me just read 4. So relating experiences as to how your life has shifted because of the idea or perspective is perhaps, potentially, maybe the best way of talking with people about it, because you're able to talk from experience. Since, like, for example, since I've started thinking like this, this has happened, or this has shifted for me, or my mind, the way in which I've approached this situation or handled this has been different, etc. Just giving examples there. I have been finding that that's really helpful. I'm not going to just say that that's the only or most helpful way, but I've been finding that I think most of the time, what people find as really intriguing when it comes to an explanation or an awareness into an idea or a perspective that they are not currently aware of, perhaps, is when it affects practically their life, or when they can see that it has affected practically your life in really helpful or positive or good ways. That, of course, in my experience, that piques someone's interest to, wow, how have you been able to handle that situation differently now, or whatever, you know what I mean? Let me just pause there, because those are just really general kind of like, really general thoughts. But does that spark any thoughts, ideas, any experiences that y'all have had around any of that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Bart, go ahead.
Am I real echoey like last week, or am I a little bit better this week?
I think I can hear you.
Okay, good. I can relate to this from my conversion out of Catholicism. And the big thing that helped me was my knowledge of the catechism and the beliefs. And truthfully, it was the Holy Spirit that prompted me and brought up, these questions in me, which made me dig. So in my converting out, I still have family members still practicing. I got baptized in my family. We're a huge family. And the good thing is the way to explain why you think and believe the way you do now helps them accept that, not agree necessarily, but accept and honor the perspective and the change, the mindset and the truth that was revealed to me. Am I making sense on that? So these are really good points. You have to dig deep. You have to dig in a way. It's not just the knowledge, it's that seeking the truth and be assured that changing your lifestyle, but you don't dishonor them and their beliefs as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. There was a little bit of that got difficult to hear, but overall, I think most of it came across, Barb, and appreciate you sharing from your own journey, from your own walk, how you see this and how it's played out with you. Any other responses from someone? I'm going to add, if someone else is, while someone else may be thinking, none of this is to say here as we write this. We don't intent is not to squelch any of our desire or enthusiasm about sharing some of this, sharing things that we've learned with others. So, don't hear it that way. We will cover some more of that motivation to share even in just a second, but it is just giving us that pause and some good reflections here to say, okay, yeah, I can see some value in going through, thinking through this, and help us even to digest the material better than to be able to regurgitate it, pardon the image, but to be able to, hopefully not puke it out on somebody, but to share it with others. Any other reflections from someone? Orion, I'll go
If
ahead.
not,
Here.
go for it.
Just inserted this here in some material from Carl Medeiros that I had just come across recently. Would have fit in better maybe a few weeks ago, but it's still relevant to what we're talking about here. Really, a class that I did a while back based on Richards and O'Brien's book, Misreading Scripture Through Western Eyes. It kind of fits with some of that, but it still helps us as we're looking at doing this interior work. So Carl says, and this is just a part of his blog on his website, as weird as it sounds, Jesus wasn't a Christian. He wasn't white, not an American. He didn't start a religion. He was brown-skinned, Middle Eastern man. He thought and spoke with Eastern logic, not an A plus B equals C Western logic, but a beautiful way with words that I've coined as stories meant to attract. He taught in parables. Carl himself grew up in the Middle Eastern context, so he has some credentials for being able to talk about this. When asked questions, he did one of four things. He didn't answer. He answered a question they weren't asking. He told a story. He asked a question back. He was okay with mystery. Interesting how we tend to read the Bible for clarity, direction, daily wisdom. All good ideas, but most of it is full of allegory and metaphor, told in story form, not very Western friendly at all. My thought is that we should learn to think like Jesus thought, like an Easterner. Understanding the Hebrew worldview will make the scriptures so much richer. Learning to talk to our postmodern neighbors with that sort of reasoning will allow their ears to be open to the ways of Jesus, learn to tell stories, to retell the parables, to answer questions the way Jesus did. It'll open doors. And of course, that's from his website there. But I say also, not that you're just probably needing another book to read, but speaking of Jesus, mentioned it before, but he does such a good job in that and talking about, forget 5-finger exercise, any kind of a, memorized plan of salvation. And he just, in a Islamic context that he operates then, and still they were in Lebanon, now they are in Greece, working with some of their Muslim friends that they've developed through the years. But the whole thought here, not just thinking like an Easterner, but challenging ourselves. It's hard for us. It's not saying we can just step out of our Western mindset. No, there's some strengths that we bring to the table from our Western perspective, strengths they bring to the table. But I find it helpful and part of it in saying he's okay with mystery, with leaving some things ambiguous. And parables tended to do that. Disciples said, in a sense, they could have been asking, why are you so vague in the way that you answer things? He might have said, what's wrong with that? But he does say, well, I talk in opaque terms. If someone doesn't really have a heart for God or persistence to, to keep seeking and searching, then they're going to be easily put off, and probably better that they are, if there's not that long-term commitment. And so overall, I just felt like, well, this could be helpful to us. And as you go on to do some of this kind of work, if you do any Audible books, I listened through it several times on Audible, speaking of Jesus, but I know you'll be blessed by it if you do. Any thought, reflection there? Ryan, I'll let you pick back up.
Okay, yeah, great. I'll just keep on going here then. So we get to the section on spiritual bypassing. So yeah, I'll just start reading. So this term, spiritual bypassing, was at least colloquially and in modern times, was first coined by a psychologist by the name of John Wellwood in 1984, and has several important dimensions, but is usually stated as the use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with our painful feelings, unresolved wounds, and developmental needs. So that is a very simple nutshell of it, but it can be explained in several other ways and with several different dimensions, of which I want to go into here. Three primary ways. So and then we could pause after we get through these three. We could pause, and I would just be keen to hear anyone's either experience personally or in anything that they've working with others, that they've seen some of the effects and ramifications of this. So number one, avoiding darker emotions, or when I say darker, it's mostly just referring to the perception that we can have as to emotions and desires or feelings that feel darker, as in heavy, as in I'll get to them in a moment, the normal ones that we list. So it says, using positive spiritual sounding ideas to cover over or avoid looking at or dealing directly with the darker emotions such as fear, guilt, lust, shame, anger within us. So in short, ignoring them, covering them over, acting like they don't exist. Now, there could be any number of reasons why we do that. And I'll say we, because I have participated in all three of these at different points in my life. And to say on this first one, any number of reasons why we do this, but one of the reasons that we all know is that in many places, not all, but many places, many churches and many spiritual settings, people are afraid to or ashamed to articulate or talk about difficult emotions, difficult desires, difficult addictive tendencies, difficult aspects of our lives. We want to look. Sorry, somebody just called me there. We want to look put together. We want to look like we're on the right track, the up and up, etc. And it's actually all too easy, neurologically speaking, brain, mind speaking. It's all too easy for a while to repress and or to cover over and or to act like, in a way I like to say, jerry rig our personality structures to look like we don't really have any problems. Of course, it's 100% false, but you can give that particular image to people in ways that you want to. I think that's probably one of the most common aspects of this, not least of which, because in general, personality structures are a complex host of defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms, etc. So even that right there, it tells us something about the way in which we and our psyche unconsciously and consciously like to be perceived in particular ways, and like to show ourselves to the world in particular ways that are not always as honest and as truthful as to what is actually going on within our minds, our hearts, however you'd like to say that. So that one is pretty simple and clear. Should I pause there, or anyone have any thoughts on that right now, or should I go to 2 and 3?
I would think move on through them and then pause.
Perfect. Okay. So number 2, elevating rightly articulated beliefs over character or transformed living. So in short, it's as we've talked many times before, it's elevating the belief structure or the articulation of belief structures over the transformation by way of the way in which we live, like how our actual felt lived experience. So we should assume that cognitively articulating a spiritual belief means that we have actually integrated that idea into our thoughts, actions, and lives. Spiritual bypassing refers to the way in which we often use our right-sounding spiritual ideas and beliefs to convince ourselves and others that we don't have doubts, angers, fears, shame to deal with, and thus we never look at and do the hard work, or have to do the hard work of integrating that truth into our thoughts and actions and behaviors, thus our lives. This again is a really nice way of disassociating. It's kind of the easy way out, for lack of better words, because for many of the contexts in which we live, or I should say, a large portion of evangelical Christianity, usually orienting around correctly articulated beliefs, or just at least saying the right things. And I don't mean that as a complete negative. There's good things about that, but needless to say, because that's part of the cultural, spiritual milieu in which we live, it is pretty easy, and we can let ourselves off the hook and or kind of take the easy route to just nailing all that down really well, while not actually paying attention to how do these beliefs that I say I believe, that I think, how do they actually filter down and shift my felt motivations, desires, habits, thoughts, the way that I live, etc. And because that is admittedly, for any of us who have experienced the movement through, say, an addictive tendency, or rooting out or shifting away from particular desire or particular motivation towards something else, even just say moved along a spectrum, we all know the amount of discipline and work that takes. And that's part of what we're talking about here. It feels often like it's avoiding a lot of that hard inner work, because it is hard. And then number 3, using our beliefs.
Wait, Ryan, before you go on, I think I'm responsible for an omission here in editing here. we will be collaborating on the spot here, but it should read, we should not assume, right, that cognitively articulating a spiritual belief means that we have done the hard work of integrating it into our lives. And I
Yes,
omitted
perfect. That sounded off.
the not there. So there is a difference there. And
Yeah,
I caught that
but
as you read it there the first time, and that's on me, not on you, because I went through that. So that
yeah, it's
makes
all
it
good.
out. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that helps. That helps for sure. That's all good. Number 3, using our beliefs to convince ourselves or others that we are better in some way. Better is, of course, highly subjective, and you can use whatever word you want to use there, but just in general to get the feeling of that one. Spiritual bypassing refers to the way in which we can use spiritual beliefs to convince ourselves that our perceived right beliefs give us a higher value over others who believe differently or wrongly in our eyes, who are not as smart, up to date, or informed as we are, etc. So generally, I mean, as you can even just get the feel of that one, this can often happen where you feel that you've learned a whole series of things that overturn maybe some of the old, traditions or way of thinking about things, and it can very quickly and easily, if you're not careful, and I've experienced this a number of times as well, where you can easily start to perceive people in a slightly lesser kind of way. Like only if they would kind of catch up to where I am, only if they could take my understanding, or only if I could convince them, then they would be better off, or they would be better people, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just say, admittedly, that almost seems to be a small trap that our psyche likes to play on us quite often. I'll say that we intentionally play on ourselves quite often. And that's one that I think we have to be on guard against quite consistently, or I'll speak for myself. Let me pause there. I think that just tries to give several different avenues into the way in which this concept, I think, has import or is helpful for us. If there's anything there that resonates with you, or any other way in which you've seen spiritual bypassing play out, please make a comment.
As I listen to those descriptions, I think that gives a nice deepening or sort of explication of what Christ was saying when he talked about daily dying to oneself. This is the kind of daily death that I think we're called to, and I think it's more descriptive of dying than some of the things we might think of ourselves as doing to get better. What you're talking about is dying to a way of being that is very easy for us to live in. And I think it articulates it well.
Susan,
Do I just hold this?
yeah, you should.
I just was thinking about, as you were reading through those, Ryan, I remember thinking several years ago, I wonder what it would be like. There was a song that came out on the radio that if we really said how we really felt when we got to church. So I thought about that one time, well, how that would be different. Well, sure enough, when Hurricane Ike and Harvey, but when we were in Houston and Hurricane Ike hit, our church building was hit, every home was touched in some way. And we ended up having church on that side of the church building on the front steps. And they just put up chairs and they had it organized, so we would have songs and preaching and the communion like a normal church service. But when people came, I just remember this, everybody asking each other, how are you? Well, it turned into a worship time of singing and prayer. Everything went out the window of an organized church service. It became what people were feeling right then. And instead of just saying, oh, I'm fine, we're good, how are you? They said, well, we lost our house, we have no electricity, or whatever. And so it was, everybody really said how they felt, and it changed the whole service. I'll never forget that. And not that organized church
Yeah.
service is bad. It was just a real interesting, it made me think of it when you were reading those things.
Yeah, well, and yeah, like what he was saying concerning just the front that we can want to put on for everyone to think that no, we're good, and so yeah, deeper sharing just results in more community together. Any other thoughts, reflections? Yep, Haley.
I just had a thought with like the darker emotions that like what Ryan said about like you put on like this positive face to avoid those feelings. I feel like I'm not going to talk in third person. In my life, I feel like when I have been struggling, you know, in my Christianity or just in my general life, that I felt like it got to the point that I was sharing in those hard emotions, and I was sharing what I was feeling, and it got to the point that I felt like I was a burden. Like it got to the point I was sharing those negative feelings so much that I felt like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Like I need to be okay because, you know, I can't live in the negativity of these feelings, which I think to an extent is true, to not live in negativity. But I felt like I got to the point that I was like, oh, I need to put this face back on because I need to be okay because I've shared the hard things. So now I need to like get over it, you know? And I think that that's something that happens a lot, not just in the church, but in life in general. And so.
Yeah, I'd want to say David as a marriage and family therapist, not to just pass things off to you, but what response would you make to Haley there? Okay, shared the point to feel like, no, shouldn't do this anymore, too heavy, too dark. What would you share about finding a balance there?
You know, I think one of the challenges in our relationships in church, especially just in the church gathering time, is the difficulty of having the kind of conversation that you really need to have. How are you doing? People ask you that in the foyer. Church is going to start in 10 minutes. You're sort of forced to say, I'm fine. When we went to promoting life groups at Quaker, we found out that we had more opportunity to talk and have conversations about what we struggled with and what was going on in our life, because we didn't have that organizational structure that we had to start and stop and all of that. And so I think part of the difficulty of having the balance of being honest and open without denying what we're really going through, and also not focusing on it so much that we're sort of overwhelmed by the negative in our life, is having structure in our spiritual communities that not only allow, but actually promote the kind of conversations that are necessary, that are open and vulnerable and even confessional. We would never take time on a Sunday night service to gather and lay hands on one another and pray. And yet that began to happen in our life groups because it felt more natural. So I guess I would say one of the ways to balance handling the difficulties and the dark times with the other part of our Christian walk is to be able to create those environments in which those are expected, rather than make the only times we have with each other in spiritual community so organized that we really organize out. I remember one time, Kirk, in our services, you actually integrated into one of our services a time of spiritual lamenting. We spend so much time praising, and we forget that lamenting is also part of our spiritual walk. And And yet, we don't have too many lament teams in churches. We have praise teams. So I think part of it is just learning to structure our lives and structure our community in a way where sharing the struggle is sort of built into the expectation of our community. And we need to think through that and to see how we have done that. I guess that's one way I would respond.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, David. And I pray that the effect for you, Haley, is not that you're ever just steered completely away from that. Understand what you're saying. We don't want to be the person who's, oh, don't ask them how they're doing. You're going to get an earful. But David, I think, makes a key point there. There's got to be the structures, and pretty obviously, really, sometimes our Sunday morning times are not. Now, Susan and I have found through the years with SHBI, that is one of the reasons that people love the studies, because it gets us outside of a traditional worship time, and people then end up sharing some deeper things that they may be struggling with in their lives. So that goes back to the structure thing that allows for that. Laney, go ahead.
I was just going to say, David, certainly agree that the life group is a much more natural and organic way to have those interactions. But and we have that, but in addition to that, maybe a year ago now, I can't remember exactly how long ago, we introduced an element into our Sunday morning service where we take, in the middle of the service, or usually it immediately follows our communion time. It flows from the communion time. But we take a period of about 8-10 minutes, maybe a little longer sometime, where the praise team will be singing quietly, and the words will be on the screen. But we call it prayer 360, which is probably not a very descriptive, but the 360 is we're praying all over the building. And our people, our men and women and our teenagers and younger, they spend that whole time in deep fellowship and prayer. I just move from group to group and not organized. It's purely organic. And it's not, how are you? I'm fine. It's, what can I pray about for you today? What's going on in your life that I can help you with? And then, as elders, we're continually being prayed over by the members. Our women and our children are praying over us in small little groups of prayer during that special time. And I've never had that anywhere else in my life. And I just think it's been one of the greatest blessings that we've had.
Well, that really is, that strikes me when you talk about, as elders, shepherd and leader, being prayed over by, women and youth. That's fantastic, and something that we desperately need, where there's that kind of humility, reception, and openness among leadership. I'll just say real quickly, because we've moved up here to Canyon Hills now, and one of the good things that we enjoyed during communion there at New Beginnings in Houston was, for years, for various reasons, part of the time we were in the YMCA, and just for various reasons, it ended up where we would get up to go out and take communion in 2 or 3 different places. And it was great in that it facilitated a little bit of what you're talking about, Laney. No longer just sitting there with my thoughts, but you're in a group either with your family or some friends, and you pray together. And sometimes the prayer goes on to include other things. And yes, the praise team, the worship might have to wait a little bit for some groups that are still praying together. But to just have some ways for ministry to spring up, within our worship service is so good to see. Any other thoughts, reflections from anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Anita.
It could be that I'm the only one who feels this way, but I do just want to say that the concept of number 1 and number 2 can be quite terrifying.
Right there, those emotions, and I would letting your emotion, not darker emotion, just your emotions pass, uh, would welcome, any further reflection on that when you're able, but and understand to some degree, mm, your response to that, and it's really significant, I think, when we read something like this and it impacts us strongly. We have a strong reaction uh, to it, to about rightly articulated beliefs over transformed character and life. Uh, one of the joys of our being here is coming to know and love your family, and certainly would say, wow, well, there's transformed living reflected in your life. And as I said earlier, sometimes we can be our harshest critic, but it is always good, and though it may be uncomfortable for us to look at this, it is good for us to think, well, Lord, um, keep working on my heart. But I will add at the same time, none of us, again, this is not to advocate, well, sharing will be off down the road some years away, because no, not at all. In the disciple making movements around the world, that's one of the powerful things that happens. As soon as a believer comes to faith, they begin to share with someone else, and it's usually the stories of Jesus that they're talking about. Well, of course, there's a brand new faith being developed there, but their sharing helps them. Now, there's all of this that Ryan has shared and that we've put together here. We do want to to think about, to do some of the hard interior work, but we're subsequently, really, I guess, at the same time, we are sharing our journey with someone else, and that helps us. Any other thoughts, David? You're unmuted there.
Yeah, I was thinking of a comment that an old pioneer preacher I heard said that, there's a ditch on both sides of the road, and the challenge is to stay out of the ditches, and that, the evil one is wise in one sense. He's strategic. He knows that he would prefer to push you in the direction you're leaning than to try to. He doesn't care which side of the boat you fall out of. He pushes you in the direction you're leaning. And we live in a culture that, it's been promoted as long as I can remember, the power of positive thinking, and how we're saved by just thinking positive thoughts. And there's certainly some truth in positive thinking, but you can push that to an extreme where you refuse to deal with reality thinking sometimes. And then there's the other side. You can push the dwelling on your struggles so much that Satan says, yeah, you're not a serious Christian if you're really having those struggles, and he'll push you out on that side of the boat. He won't try to get you to think positively. He'll just try to get you to think darker. And so either way we lean, the evil one pushes us further in that direction. And I think one of the reasons we have community, and God gave us the gift of community, is that we lean different ways. And our brother, our sister has a way of correcting us and balancing us. And those relationships that push back one in different directions, I think, help us to find the balance that's most helpful. And so just stay in the boat and don't get pushed out is, I guess, one of the things I think is wise.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Ryan?
I'll just add, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, David, and I appreciate what you both said there, Anita and Haley. As you're just been thinking as y'all said those things that kind of like David said, but my first thought was, I think we've all been there. We've all been in the place where not just circumstantially, but perhaps more things are coming up for us in a particular season of life, where things feel a bit heavier, or things, or any number of things that are happening. And like you noted, Haley, sometimes it feels like a burden, or it's overwhelming, or it's even just tiresome to keep articulating what we're feeling, if it's particularly heavy, or particularly even just frustrating to ourselves, because sometimes we don't quite feel that we know how to get out of it ourselves. And needless to say, one of the things that is always helpful is a community, or a person, even just a singular person, who is willing to sit with that experience that you are having, or that anyone is having. And I hope you got that at some point. I know in different ways at different times, I got that, and other times I did not. And I think that's probably true for a lot of us as well. Where part of what happens when someone is willing to sit with someone with whatever they're feeling, whatever they're experiencing and going through, is one, I think, like David used the analogy, it, in a way, you can help that person to just stay in the boat, to sit in the boat. You can help by being willing, without any of the fear and the angst that often comes up for us when someone is experiencing doubt, or experiencing fear, or a depression, or any of the so-called heavy emotions. We can tend to feel, oh no, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to help them. Or I think for many people, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance that comes in, a little bit of maybe preconceived belief that God should have healed you of this. Like, you should be good, right? The Spirit is within you. You shouldn't be experiencing any of this. So there's a little bit of, I don't really know what to do, and all I can say are, the little platitudes that we've all heard. Oh well, just pray harder, or God's going to heal you, don't worry. Just all those normal things that we say. When what we really need is just someone to sit in the boat with us, and someone to be able to say, one, me too. Like, and I think we all know. And I mean, I would love to hear more, from either or both of you, at some point, by way of, if anything was helpful, what was helpful. But I know for myself, that little experience of that I'm not alone in this, that somebody has also experienced this. And in fact, not just someone, but everyone, right? And just some are more aware of it, some are more articulate about it, some don't ignore it, and others do, and that's fine. But some who have actually gone through these heavier, difficult periods, that's the person I want to sit with, because I want to be able to see mirrored back to me that it's possible to look at all these things, and not just possible to get through them, because again, we are a people who like to get through things quickly / to not have anything ever happen. And David actually had a really wonderful sermon on Sunday that was precisely about this, about being willing to be patient, and being willing to wait in really difficult times and really difficult periods. And I mean, of course, that's easier said than done. And I can also, like, I think both of you speak from experience on this one as well. In fact, it's perpetual, and that's part of the reason probably why I thought some of this was worth putting on. Is just to say that it can be perpetual awareness of some subterranean, desires, emotions, thoughts that feel kind of heavy. And of course, part of the other aspect of having a community, or just even one person, like I said, to be willing to sit, is precisely to say some of what, or at least to mirror back some of what is here, I think, further down, which is the reason why these so-called, you know, darker emotions and darker experiences, and it's even hard to label them like that, because in a way that's just coloring them with a perception, and they don't need to be colored in that way. They are emotions, they are feelings, they are desires, and what is helpful is being willing and able to bring them to the light, which is to say, to look at them and to ask Spirit or Jesus to look at them with you. And in doing so, it robs them of a lot of power. And in fact, there's a really interesting idea in psychology that I think I've experienced as true, and I think it is true. And it's that the more you don't look at something, the more power it has. And the more you look at it, the quicker it dissolves. And this is, of course, we have the idea even that that well, I'll just say with that idea, part of what I've experienced is the willingness to be able to recognize that down underneath these heavy and or difficult emotions or experiences or circumstances, you could almost say underneath it is firm ground. It's almost like we perceive them as these really dark, heavy clouds full of whatever rain and hail, et cetera, et cetera. But then standing on the foundation that we stand upon, if we actually allow ourselves to look at them, sometimes, not all the time, and not all the time it's quick, sometimes, but sometimes they dissipate, and they dissipate so quickly as if they had no existence whatsoever. And that's really interesting, and it's an interesting experience to have, because again, it's some of that perception that we can build up or create in our minds, where things can be more than what they actually are. I'm saying that, of course, I would like to give really specific experiences for each one of these, but one, it would take a lot of time, and two, probably unnecessary. But just to try and resonate with what I think both of you had said. Let me pause there before go on. Anyone have any reflections on that?
I'll hold off on mine if someone else was waiting to jump in.
Can you hear me? I'd
Yeah,
like to say
Barb.
that in my darker times, the work that God helped me through, and the book that helped me through accepting and working through those darker times is the book of Psalms. I could relate with David, and and I always ask the Lord, give me something to stand on while I'm reading this. And the one section is, why are you downcast, O my soul? My hope, my trust is in the Lord. And so I just like to say, reading the Psalms whenever, and Ecclesiastes is another book whenever I go through some of this darker stuff.
Thank you, Barb. Yeah, I think a lot of us can, that some of the Psalms would resonate with us. And I was wanting to add comment both on David and Ryan in talking about the importance of someone to talk with, someone who can receive whatever we share without any judgment or condemnation. I appreciate that image from Richard Rohr and talking about that's the way that God sees us. We just don't believe that. That's not the image that we've been conditioned with. So we need that, you know, someone else in our life like that. And then I just wanted to add the component of centering prayer. When David was talking about, you know, stay in the boat, Ryan mentioned that. And so together with someone else, it's not to say, oh, we should just be able to pray about it, but in tandem with, you know, having someone to talk to. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've tried to work on being centered with God in prayer. And there's been a minuscule amount of progress, you know, where I can actually feel like I am talking to God about something in some decades past, I would pray, but that awareness that talking with a friend was not there. And so that's begun to grow a little bit. And that is helpful. That's another one of those, someone who will sit with us. And I mentioned Roar because he's just done so well at making me aware that God gazes at us, without judgment. We just can't hardly conceive of that. But I think it is so very true. And James kind of alludes to that in James 1. I've always read it in a different way. But if we gaze steadily at this steadiness of God, this acceptance and this love of God, that, begins to change me and see myself truly that way and to look at other people that way. So wanted to add that as part of some of the interior work that we all, want and need to do. Any other thoughts, David?
Let me I want to kind of reinforce what was said about the Psalms, because I think that's why the Psalms have been given to us. Most of the Psalms are laments. There are more Psalms that deal with our struggles than anything else. We think of Psalms as praising, but really most of the Psalms is struggling and crying out and saying, what's going on? And the very structure of Psalms typically starts with, where are you? Why? How? Help, and then it moves to that conversational relationship you're talking about, Kirk, but this I recall, this I bring to mind. My God loves me and he's with me and he's not giving up on me. To me, the chapter I give to people when they're really struggling with their life is the Lamentations 3. Jeremiah is just fed up and screaming with how hard his life is going. And then that explodes finally in the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. We sing that song, we don't know the context of it, but that song comes out of intense pain, intense struggle, intense frustration with our lives not going the way we want them. And I think we maybe I even think Jesus sometimes I've had moments where I've wrestled in my prayer and struggled with my thoughts and feel like I've heard Jesus say, I know how you feel. Because Jesus has had moments where he struggled in his prayers. He called out. And I mentioned before, I think sometimes we think because Jesus never sinned, he never struggled. And he understands our struggles so well. And to hear him say, I know how you feel, to me has been helpful at times, when I'm going through times of difficulty.
Yeah.
If I can just say something on that.
Sure,
Sorry,
Ryan, you go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, I really appreciate all of those words there, David. One thing that was standing out to me was, like I've noted several times, being with our Indian brothers and sisters who don't have the all of the scriptures, but most certainly not the Old Testament. I was reading from Lamentations 3. I really appreciate that was in your sermon as well. I was reading from Lamentations 3 when I was with them one morning. We had a devotion, and one of the brothers just started crying, and he said, "I had no clue that was in the Bible." Right? They don't have limitations because they don't have the Bible, and that it stuck out to me as. And he just said he's been going through a particularly difficult period of time. Losing both of his parents, being kicked out of the family because he became Christian, et cetera, et cetera. And he just said, I thought I had to be, strong and like optimistic all the time. I didn't know that I was allowed to lament. And to hear that there's a book of the Bible that is called Lamentations. And it was really powerful. And that really struck me just as you're making that point that we can forget that as well. And even I think generally, if I can say it this way, not to say it too strongly, but I kind of feel sometimes that a lament and a struggle is more the norm for most of us than it is just an odd thing that happens every once in a while. And I think usually we treat it like, oh, well, that's just a little phase of you being frustrated. Hop out of that as quick as you can. And it's kind of like, no, my experience is that that's an underlying norm, and for many reasons. And I would say that neurologically speaking, by the way that our brains work, the way what it means and what it's like to be a human, what it's like to live in this world with these connections, with relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these ways in which it just holds at the surface some difficulty and struggle, and not least of which we can commonly forget the very name, God's son, and or the people of Israel named as God's son several times. Israel itself meaning to wrestle or to struggle. And that is the people with which we have the entirety of this line of scriptures that we get to read. And to think that some of the unnecessary words and voices that we get are, no, you're well, and let me say this, you're to live your best life now, be victorious, claim all the whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And there is power and goodness to that because it is true. But at the same time, it does feel like what is more true with a lot of us. I would say all of us, just some of us are not aware of it and not willing to bring it to the surface. But it's that there is a perpetual sense of struggle and or confusion and or just trying to understand, trying to make it in different ways, and being able and willing to hear someone say that without any judgment, without any opposition, and certainly without any trying to cover it up or fix it, is probably one of the most courageous and loving things that we can do. And I think we could all agree, for the people who have done that for each of us, we're eternally grateful for them, aren't we? And that's where it kind of makes me ask the question, am I the kind of person that people come and talk to when they're really struggling? And if not, why not? What is it? And if so, wonderful. Maybe that's a way of engaging with that. Not to keep going on long, but I appreciated that.
That's so good. And I just, to continue with that thought, the Lamentations 3, what is it, 23 or so, as you mentioned, David, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. And as you mentioned, it's so important to realize the context. It's like a scorched earth context out of which Jeremiah is writing that, the destruction of Jerusalem. It's an apocalyptic landscape. It is the kind of the post-inhabited landscape. And in the midst of such devastation and destruction, to be able to make a statement of trust. And that makes me think of, again, I think it was Rohr. He's not the only one I read, I promise you. But he just has some memorable statements that as we mature, we should develop more of a sober joy, not a giddy happiness, but a down-to-earth, sober joy. And the companion thought is what I'm missing. I so wanted to ask you, honey, to bring me my computer so I could look up the other component of that. But to live that it all goes along with what we're saying here as we deepen in our walk with the Lord. It doesn't mean that we're not joyful and happy. It's a sober one. It's like joy and pain are parallel tracks in our lives. It's not highs and lows. It's a constant presence in our life. And that is in line with what you were saying, Ryan, that it really is always there for us sometimes. And it's okay that we get some temporary breaks from it when they go to the movies and escape for an hour and a half and watch something to get away, but we come back and we still deal with that. Great great thoughts and discussion. Anyone else? Brian, I would say at least just hit some highlights, because these are like, well, here's some suggestions for putting some of these structures, you know, into our lives. You know, the number 3, a daily practice of blessing people you don't agree with. You know, I think just need to touch on just at least a few things there, and it's okay if we go a few minutes over. If this is our last one, you know, could say, well, we can go a half hour over, but we won't do that to everybody. But it's
Yeah.
okay to.
Yeah, well, several of these just touch on, I think, several things that each of you have said. So kind of just by way of summary, and I know a lot of you, you know, you have different ways in which you orient or structure your day by way of time for communion with God, and or for reading scripture, and or for praying, etc. So whatever works for you is great. I've found that being very disciplined, and I know the word structure and discipline for some personality structures is like, let me run the other direction, and so I'm sorry for that, but just using those words, I do feel that it takes just a little bit of discipline to do the difficult thing of being willing to look at thoughts and feelings, emotions that come up throughout the week. And if you know, if we're busy, we don't have time during the day, no problem. Just have something and jot it down. And then, you know, once a week or once a day, whatever helps for you, just be willing to pull out that trigger that you had felt. And just, you know, it's as simple as sitting with Spirit, Jesus, however you imagine it, and just saying, hey, this was interesting. You know, an enormous amount of anger came out of nowhere when this person said this. You know, what's going on here? And then just really sitting with it and being willing to listen, and being willing to the general principle that I like to work with, because I feel like it's very empowering, is to treat every circumstance, every trigger, every person, every event as a message, as a teacher, as something that has something to offer you, to allow you to release something that maybe you're holding on to, or to allow you to have an expanded, a more expanded, you know, awareness, or to allow you to shift your mind in some way. And that's, I had the words, you know, each of these can be a renewing of our mind if we allow them to, or they can further solidify us in trying not to look at the things that are coming up. So I had it at number 2, just to say, you know, these triggering events, they can be messages, they can be teachers in this way, if we're willing to look at them. And that's where we had, you can't heal what you don't acknowledge, and you can't transform what you've pretended doesn't exist. I feel like that's a powerful statement. That's a statement from the book at number 2 in resources, Dr. Allison Cook, who is a therapist and a theologian, and a really good book there. I think all of you, or a lot of us here, I'll just say in general, I would really appreciate the book. As Dad noted, I have found consistently, almost without fail, that a practice, some kind of practice, whatever is most helpful for you, some kind of practice of blessing the people in your life that you can tend to have, you know, that can tend to rub you. We could just say that tend to be really annoying / people, if you were willing to admit to yourself, people that you really don't like being around that much, or just to say it simply, for whatever reason, things they say, their personality structure, they trigger us in all the ways in which we just want to say, I don't really want to hang around that person that much. I found it to be a really interesting, almost just experiment, just to, as much as you are able, and with whatever words and with whatever feelings, incrementally just spend time blessing them. And I say bless because normally what we say is pray for them. And normally I wrote this because, you know, I've heard this several times, but it always sticks in my mind. You know, a lot of times when we pray for someone like that, what we're saying is, you know, Jesus, I really don't like this person. I don't like how they think. I don't like how they are. They really make me angry and uncomfortable. So would you please change that person so that I can feel a lot better, right? That's normally just kind of in general what we're saying. And you can even just get the feel of it and say, okay, maybe there's another problem. Maybe part of what needs to be looked at is why I feel angry and uncomfortable around that person, and being willing to look at that. And that's where, like Dad said earlier, part of what we're doing is being willing to look at what is within us, rather than trying to say everyone out there is the problem. I'm not the problem, but they certainly are. And Jesus, you really have your work cut out for you to try and change all those people. And then B, it's kind of the same idea. Or I basically just said that. And then, the final one, just all these go together, and we've already noted them, but I've just been noticing some of the freedom that comes in recognizing that everyone is safe with God, with the Spirit working in them wherever they are on their journey. And you could say it like, maybe you are a part of their journey, who you get to say something to them, or maybe just your being, your presence, the way that you act around them. Maybe that is a vehicle or a tool through which Spirit will work in their hearts and minds and lives. But also you can just trust. We can trust the Spirit's work in people. And I find that that's a very freeing, just kind of feeling, or reminding of yourself. It's not up to me to convince this person. It's not up to me to change them. The Spirit is already working in them, and we can say the Spirit, just in general, let's say, knows what the Spirit is doing. And of course, this is where we give our willingness to be as helpful of a presence and as helpful in particular places and times that we can be, but also just giving all of our trust that the Spirit is working in that person wherever they are on their journey. And it may be a very different place than where you are on your journey, but just remember that you also came from a trajectory, and that if you were to see yourself 20 years ago, you may say, dear God, like I would have a hard time being around that person, right? So we all can just pay attention to the way in which Spirit has worked within us. Also, I find that to be helpful and freeing in general, by way of being willing to extend trust. I'll just pause there. Does anyone have any thoughts on this, or any other practice or that you have that you think is helpful?
I wanted to share a quote from C.S. Lewis that's always helped me. That goes back to what you said about God messaging us in our experiences, speaking to us. Lewis said that he whispers in our pleasures, he speaks in our conscience, he shouts in our pain. That whatever we're going through, God is speaking to us. He's interacting with us, and sometimes he is interacting with us the most when we're in our pain, if we're just listening to that. But I always thought that quote was helpful to me.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
That is good. And Ryan, I meant to include this when you said here, and I just forgot to go back and get this quote. You said it pretty close into what I had. We can trust that the Spirit is working in and through that person. And I had seen it in the context of parents praying for their children. It specifically said, Father, since you are at work through the Spirit in our children, we trust you to be working when and how you see best. You can broaden that out. Father, since you're at work in the lives of these loved ones, family members, siblings, whoever they are, I can trust you to be working as you see best. And that doesn't take us out of the picture, but we are with God in the process. Since you are at work, I can trust you to be working. And I think that answers part of the question, and not all of it, but how do we take this and talk with others? And we've got to get some things right in our heart as we're looking at that number one, we don't have a Messiah complex. I'm not Jesus, so I'm not out to to save that person. God is at work. So the older thought from Blackaby studies, God is at work, so join him where he is working. And all of those can help position us to say, okay, I am with you in this work, Father. And that thought has been good for Susan and I. It's a given. He's at work in the lives of our loved ones. So I trust you to be working. And that's a real hard statement to make sometimes, isn't it? I trust you, Father. I have to say, I have to add this thought. Yours there from C.S. Lewis would be good to have here, David. But the component I was missing in that other quote, I'm just going to rephrase it just a little bit. Maturity, if we're in our mature years, this is what it should look like. But maturity is characterized by, and the word that I was missing is a bright sadness and sober happiness. And bright sadness was one that caught my attention. Oh, I thought, okay, that makes sense. Mature years will, if they're mature, they will be characterized by, yes, there's a sadness, a heaviness of things, a heartbreak of people we love, a bright sadness, and a sober happiness that may not resonate with everyone as much as it did me, but it's like, yeah, that's real. I can see that. It's a companion thought to what Eugene Peterson said at one time: how to live with a light heart in difficult times.
Yeah, that's really good. And if I could just add, part of the thought with that, I think, that we all know that what that means is not, oh, let me try and avoid looking at the difficulty of something. We all know that's not what we're talking about. That's once again bypassing. But it's precisely in the idea that is at the very heart of the Judeo-Christian way of thinking. And I say both because it is at the heart of both, which is that it is precisely in the most difficult of things that God is using those very difficult things to redeem and to renew all things into that which we might term as bright or as joyful, etc. And it's precisely that we are trusting, or it's God's work in that way that we are trusting. And that just helps, even just to say it that way, because, it's just, thinking about some of the things that we said here and some of the ways in which some of the, for lack of a better word, subjectively termed darker aspects of our thoughts and emotions and desires and motivations, how they can be scary to look at. And from within that mind frame, though, part of the idea and part of what I think is freeing is, if part of what, if not the whole, I could say, but I'll just at least say part of the purpose of experiencing difficult things, of going through difficult things, is precisely to be refined, for lack of better words, is precisely to become more and more in the image of Christ that we really are. Then we could look at each one of these difficulties as a little bit more of a gift than so much of a bane. And that's where, I just think about the work at number 4, some of these resources that we have, but number 4, while not in a Christian way, he does a remarkably good job of trying to help you to see any addictive tendencies or addictive thoughts or thought patterns as a gift. And precisely because it is precisely because of some of those patterns and thoughts and emotions that expands us, that opens us up to be able to see things differently, to see others differently, to be with others differently. But then we would say, in a more, if you want to say in a more Christian way, we would say it's really a gift to walk through that, because the depth and the breadth that gives you of being able to speak from a place of what it feels like, what it looks like, and an experience, kind of a lived experience of God taking that which is difficult, or that which we have created as difficult, and weaving it into something that is much more, you don't want to just say beautiful, but that is much more able to give something out of it. And usually what we mean by that is, now we are able to sit with someone who is in that same difficulty. And now we are able to be with them in a way that is much more empathic, is much more loving, is much more even just able to hold that, the foundation of the boat with them and for them. And is that not, of course, what Jesus does for us and did for us, et cetera. So I was just looking at some of these resources and saying, I think this is part of how we can help to reframe a lot of the difficult things that we experience into things that can yield that which we could say is fruit and or a gift. Let me pause there.
Let me just add real quickly a phrase that has helped me over the last several years. It was, person realizing he was actually a preacher from the 1800s that basically said, "My God," he said, I thank you for the good things, but I have never thanked you for the thorns among the roses. I have never thanked you for the difficult things in my life. And as he began to do that more and more, to thank God for those thorns, it reframed them, it reshaped them, Ryan, as you were saying, it cast them in a different light. And so I have that pop up daily. Now, I don't do it daily, but the old song, we never promised you a rose garden, it's actually more appropriate than we would think, because how comfortable would it be to sleep in a rose garden? I mean, beauty mixed with pain. And so, yeah, it really is an apt metaphor for our lives. But I just appreciate that thought. Thank God for the thorns. Again.
Yeah, that's good. Well, just to finish here, I just wanted to point out with the resources, not that any of you need more things to read in your life, but if you just happen to be thinking today, I wish I had 6 more books that I needed to read, I've helped you out here. So number 1 is probably the most excellent book as it relates to spiritual bypassing in a very comprehensive and helpful way. I almost feel now that it's just essential reading for any human, but most certainly any Christian. And then Dr. Alison Cook, like I noted, it's a really beautiful book on how to sit with and walk through difficult and heavy experiences and emotions, etc. And then her article on spiritual bypassing, then the Scott Killaby work, which has a lot of practices of being able to actually, and this group has an unbelievable track record of healing addictive tendencies, addictive thought patterns. So there really is something to the approach that they have there. And then, of course, Richard Rohr's Everything Belongs is just a really helpful work of precisely everything we've been talking about tonight. For men, mostly, but I said women also, if you want to. Robert Augustus Masters has a book on how to be a man. Most books that have that kind of title are, I run away from, but this one is really, really brilliant. And it's precisely for men who have the most difficult time in our culture, being willing to look at, articulate, sit with emotions, feelings, etc. He walks through all of that as a psychotherapist. It's really helpful. And then he has a similar book, which is Bringing Your Shadow Out of the Dark, which is exactly what we've been talking about. What does it look and feel like, and how to being able to look at some of what we would term as dark that is within us. And I found it, while it's not just an overt spiritual approach or a Christian approach, I found it with the foundation that I think we all have to be a very illuminating or like a helpful book that we can tie in some of the other thoughts that we've been talking about here. So I'll stop with that.
Well, any other reflections or concluding thoughts from anyone? And it doesn't have to be the end of conversation. You can, any thoughts, questions, dilemmas, just send them Ryan's way. He will sort it out. No, I mean, you can connect with us, of course, but barring something hitting us this week and us sending out an email saying, we got to go one more, barring that, we will be bringing this one to a close tonight. So I do want we have gone a little over, so we do need to land this thing soon. I've gone 10 minutes over tonight. I'll just finish with just many of us hear it and talk about blessings, and this is not a case of blessing those you disagree with, but using Aaron's blessing, priestly blessing, to just finish with, to speak to all of us, myself included, but just say, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Well,
It was very good,
it's been
gentlemen.
very
Thank
good.
you ever so much.
Yeah.
Thank all of you.
Thank all of you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Good night. Bless you. Bless you. Good night.